Hello, everyone. It looks like we reached that next stop I talked about. If you're still on this train with me, I appreciate it, because this ride hasn't exactly been smooth. The last stop was about truth and perception, how people stopped believing in what they hear and started believing what they see. But this stop goes deeper. It's about balance between men and women, compassion and common sense, equality and survival itself. So grab your seat. This one might make the ground a little wobbly. For a long time, the left had the moral advantage. They were the ones standing up for fairness, equality, and compassion. But somewhere along the way, that balance broke. The sad part about all of this is that the left actually used to have leverage. For a long time, they were the reasonable ones. Conservatives were the ones perfectly comfortable being outrageous and controversial in public. Take Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example.
And can you tell me why so many people that support Donald Trump love conspiracy theories, including yourself? He seems to attract lots of conspiracy theorists.
Well, let me tell you, you're a conspiracy theorist, and the left and the media spreads more conspiracy theories. We like the truth. We like supporting our Constitution, our freedoms, and America first. So,
what about Jewish space lasers? Tell us about Jewish space
no,
lasers.
why don't you go talk about Jewish space lasers? And really, why don't you off? How about that?
Thanks. Thank you very much.
That was very mature. So she was out there promoting wild conspiracies about Jewish people controlling space lasers or the US government manipulating the weather to cause hurricanes. That kind of talk should have been political suicide, but somehow, despite all of that chaos on the right, the Conservative Party ended up winning the narrative. The left overplayed their hand with labeling, censorship, and moral superiority, and in the process, they lost the very credibility that once made them the voice of reason. Another reason it's sad is because the left also used to have real leverage on women's rights. Conservatives would advocate for traditional values, but in reality, those values were often oppressive and patriarchal. Democrats were the ones who wanted to upend that system, and for a time they did, but when they broke that mold, what replaced it wasn't structurally sound. Democrats created a welfare system that, while built on good intentions, wasn't sustainable. It was never designed to handle the kind of overcrowding and long-term dependency that it eventually produced. When a system relies too heavily on support instead of self-sufficiency, it starts to collapse under its own weight. And that's exactly what happened. It became so unstable that it actually made the old so-called traditional systems look like they were right all along. But the truth is, if those old systems had really worked, they never would have needed to be changed in the first place. People forget that they confuse nostalgia with functionality. The irony is that the so-called traditional gender roles Republicans romanticize were never really what they think they were. Yes, in early human societies, men were hunters and women were gatherers. But research shows that women actually collected more food on average and often had just as much influence in group decisions and community governance. Anthropologists have documented this across multiple hunter-gatherer cultures. Women's work wasn't secondary, it was essential. Scholars like Kristen Hawkes and Richard Lee later supported this in their field studies, showing how cooperative roles between sexes made survival possible. The idea of strict male dominance didn't even emerge until the agricultural era, when land, inheritance, and property started to matter more than community. Anthropologists like Sarah Hardy and Kristen Hawkes have both written that cooperation, caregiving, and complementary roles were what made human survival possible in the first place. Early human groups didn't thrive because of strict hierarchies or competition. They survived because they learned to share leadership and responsibility. It was the balance of strength between men and women, hunters and gatherers, protectors and nurturers, that created stable communities. Shared leadership and equal partnership within those structures weren't signs of weakness, they were the reason humanity endured. Hunter-gatherer societies thrived for thousands upon thousands of years for a reason. It was because they understood that survival depended on cooperation, not dominance. Every role mattered. Every contribution had a value. When that balance was maintained, humanity flourished. Popular culture often imagines early humans as brutal or oppressive, like the way movies such as 10,000 BC portray forced marriages or submissive roles for women. But that's not what anthropology shows. Those kinds of hierarchies came much later, after agriculture began and humans started owning land, property, and power. In the true hunter gatherer era, equality wasn't an ideal, it was a necessity for survival. And even after that, not every civilization followed a patriarchal model. The Minoans are a perfect example of how advanced gender balance can look. Men worked as merchants, builders, and soldiers, but women weren't in the background. They were front and center in both politics and religion. They presided over temples, led rituals, managed estates, and likely influenced governance itself. Archaeologists like Nano Mariatos and Barbara Olson described Minoan society as one where power was genuinely shared, in fact, less patriarchal than ours today. Women weren't fighting for equality there, they already had it. You see similar patterns in ancient Egypt, where women could own property, run businesses, and even rule as pharaohs. In the Etruscan civilization of pre-Roman Italy, where women appeared only in civic life, in early Celtic tribes which produced female rulers like Boudica, and in Iroquois Confederacy, where women literally chose and removed male chiefs. These cultures thrived under shared influence, not domination, and that completely discredits the idea that patriarchy is somehow natural or necessary. The things that are true, the things you can't argue, are the ones rooted in biology. Yes, men generally have more physical strength, and that played a role in certain divisions of labor and roles. But strength and leadership are not the same thing, and using physiological advantage to justify social dominance is where everything went wrong. Patriarchy may have been convenient in a world built on survival and welfare, but it stopped being necessary a long time ago. The left understood that patriarchy wasn't necessary, and they were right about that, but instead of accepting basic human instincts and building a healthier system around them, they tried to erase those instincts altogether. They denied that women are naturally caring, emotional, and community driven, or that many women generally find meaning in nurturing and connection. They also denied that men have instincts to protect, to build, to work with their hands, to provide, and to find purpose in being needed. These instincts aren't oppressive, they're just human. What the left should have done was reject the toxic interpretations of those instincts, not the instincts themselves. For example, rejecting the idea that women can't be in leadership or they can't serve effectively in the military or that they shouldn't be equal decision makers in the home. Those were the real problems. The belief that strength made one sex in the authority over the other. Not every past society got that balance right. Plenty were deeply sexist and cruel, but a few managed to find that kind of harmony we could have learned from. Anthropologists like Richard Lee, who studied the Kungsan and Hasda gatherers, showed that societies based on cooperation and shared responsibility were the most stable. And the truth is, when societies, whether ancient or modern, try to ease instinct altogether in the name of equality, they end up collapsing too. History proves it, and modern research keeps showing the exact same pattern. The Shakers in early America tried to eliminate sexuality and family bonds. They vanished within a century. Ideological movements like the Soviet Union and Maoist China tried to replace human instincts with dogma, and millions paid the price. Even modern thinkers like Yuval Harari and Peter Turchin point out that when you deny what people naturally are, their drives, emotions, and need for purpose, the system always falls apart. The modern left made that same mistake, confusing equality with sameness, and it's costing them the narrative. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for a system that embraces equal opportunity, There are plenty of fields that have been male dominated for no good reason and could thrive just as well as with women. Carpentry is one example. There's no reason women couldn't master the trade and excel. And on the other side, men make incredible chefs, even though cooking was traditionally seen as women's work. The same goes for the military. There are exceptional female sharpshooters and pilots who've proven their skills again and again. Not everyone does well on the front lines, but there's more than one way to serve. You don't have to fight your basic instincts to succeed in spaces that used to belong to the opposite sex. You just have to work with your limits. I'm also in support of systems that actually let people choose how they want to live, as long as it's stable and works for them. If a husband wants to work while his wife stays at home with the kids, that's fine, but when he comes home, they should share the responsibility together. She shouldn't be working around the clock just because her job happens to be at home. The same goes for if the roles are reversed. If a woman works and the man stays home, he shouldn't be shamed for it, and she should still be equally involved when she gets home. And if both parents want to work, then come home to raise their children together, that should work too. What matters isn't who takes which role, it's the partnership is balanced and both people feel supported. The problem is it's getting harder and harder to have that kind of balance. Childcare costs are so high that even two working parents struggle to make it work. Republicans keep pushing this fantasy of returning to a traditional model where the man works and the woman stays home, but that's just not realistic or fair. It's just another form of quiet oppression. And Democrats went too far in the other direction, glorifying single motherhood as if that should be the new standard. Neither of these are extremes or what families actually need. What we need is a system that values partnership, not dependence, not isolation, but shared strength and stability. So maybe that's what this stop was really about. Remembering that balance is what holds everything together. When compassion loses common sense, it turns destructive. When equality forgets biology, it becomes denial. And when ideology replaces human instincts, societies fall apart. If you made it this far, thank you for staying on board. This train doesn't promise comfort, it promises clarity. Every stop gets a little rougher, but also a little more honest. So if you're still here, it probably means you care more about truth than popularity. Until the next stop, thanks for riding with me. Bye.